All right, so welcome to, I guess, the audience that is looking in and listening today, and thank you for everyone else that spoke before us. Some pretty interesting topics going on, really cool to see what's going on there and in the optimization and mobile technology industry. I have with me today Matt Cohen. I'll go into an introduction, but let me just start off with a quick intro of myself. Then we'll go into a couple topics, so we'll discuss what the mobile-first landscape looks like for Matt and his team. We'll dive into what designing for scale and speed looks like, especially with a company like Fox News Network and the scale of the audience. And then we'll touch on something, the election coverage, which should be an interesting conversation, and then we'll jump into Q&A. Sound good to you, Matt?
Sounds good.
Awesome. I like the black shirt today.
Oh, the fact that we didn't have to get dressed up for this. This is
Perfect.
awesome.
It's a new work from home outfit. So I've had the pleasure of being an acquaintance of Matt's for, God, I think it's almost a year now, Matt, since we've been at least chatting. Yeah, so it's been a pleasure to get to know you over that period of time. So for anyone that's watching, Matt is the director of Fox News and Fox Business Digital Properties. Part of Matt's role is to oversee the product management, product support teams. And prior to joining Fox, Matt worked in the product division at FactSet, a financial software firm, and is based out in New York City, which I've had the pleasure to come and visit you in multiple times. And apparently new news that we've got a new dog named Juliet. Is she making an appearance today?
I'm going to try to get her out.
All right.
She created for herself before, so I'll see if I can tease her out.
Cool. Awesome. And then to introduce myself, again, I'm Naraine. I'm the Director of Strategic Accounts at Taplytics. I work with some of Taplytics' larger enterprise clients to make sure, one, the product and service that they are using with us is equivalent to what their goals and needs may be. And that's about my role in a nutshell. So why don't we start off with mobile strategy and mobile-first landscapes? I know this will be a pretty heavy topic, but why don't we call it the obvious? COVID-19. Absolutely changed everything. Look at our outfits, which I think for you and I is a blessing. It's great. But from business strategies, customer preferences to product needs, one thing that we've seen as a business at Taplytics in the digital world, oddly enough, is that COVID has driven up the digital usage. So obviously people are at home. They've got more access to their digital tools, whether it's iPad, phone, computer, providing an opportunity to learn more about your customers than ever before. That would be my assumption. The question I would pose for you, Matt, is how has COVID changed your view and your team's view on the mobile products strategy? And the second follow-up to that is what are you doing to adapt to those changes?
Totally. And COVID was interesting in a number of ways because you saw a company, I mean, first you dealt with the workflow situation, which all of a sudden, we were very much in office. Everyone's kind of in New York, kind of huddled around a single area, a single floor, and chatting with each other. And so almost overnight, especially overnight for my team, I was actually on my honeymoon up until March 7th, came back, the office closed that day.
I remember that.
I didn't get to, I still have stuff in my desk, so that has not been picked up. And so you had this overnight shift in workflow. At the same time, you were seeing a dramatic shift in usage. Because not only did you have a huge desire for news, you also had, from our side, a demand to kind of push not only content, but information, knowledge, because everyone at the same time was questioning, how do I do this? What can I do? What's the facts here? What's the newest update from this? And so you had this huge workflow shift combined with this huge thirst for news. And so it was interesting how it ended up fleshing out because surprisingly, and I think this kind of is thanks to the culture that our team had where we were so close-knit that moving from a conference room to a Zoom session kind of was pretty flawless. And we're a pretty lean team over at Fox News, Fox Business. And I think that helped us tremendously because I could grab 5 people and you had enough people to get something done. Whereas, some other organizations, you need 100 people to kind of move the ship. And so I think that was huge for us. Another piece is, we had the equipment already. We had Zoom, we had Slack, we had the integrational tools. So you had that piece that piece ended up working out very nicely. But then now at the same time that you're just figuring out workflow how can everyone connect, and does everyone have monitors, does everyone have this? Now you have to answer to the users who are demanding a tremendous amount of work, and also you have an election looming, which takes up, we'll talk about that later, but takes up a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was, first, I think the right thing that I look back and I think it was the perfect move is we all took a breath and we said, okay, what can we focus on? Because I saw what I saw out there was a lot of people just quick reacting to things to get stuff out. And because we're a lean team, we didn't have that. We didn't have the freedom to go down a rabbit hole that didn't pan out. And so I think everyone took a breath and we linked up with our editorial team and kind of said, what do we need to give to our users? Do they need information about vaccines? Do they need heat maps about where COVID's spreading? We did a reopening map about, what states are reopening, what states are closing, what's reopening. And so that was an interesting experiment because we were never huge into the kind of informational data visualization space. And then overnight, that was all people wanted.
Change.
So you had to pivot to that element. And then on top of that, which you alluded to, it was actually interesting. We saw a shift towards desktop, which makes sense because all of a sudden everyone's at home. What do you have? Your laptop.
You're on your computer all day. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as I think we've progressed through the pandemic, you're starting to see it go back to kind of what it was pre-pandemic, which you had more mobile usage. I think another interesting piece, and you alluded to, is we had this entire ecosystem going where you were using one of our platforms at one time, but you were using the mobile app, when you're on the go. You were using the desktop when you were, sitting at your office or sitting at home.
Yeah.
Now what we're seeing is people are using multiple platforms simultaneously or in one session. And so what's important to us is you need that same experience. And this goes to kind of, it taught us a lot of lessons on designing an experience across every platform for that platform. And so we can't just throw you a desktop experience on mobile, and we can talk about this a little more.
Yeah.
We have to give you the experience that we're trying to give you, but on the platform. And so I think that we've always been working on, but this kind of brought that to the forefront.
Wow, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, working at a hyper-growth company, some amazing clients, what you said absolutely resonates with a lot of the things that we speak with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's current clients or potential new clients. It makes a lot of sense. The environment's obviously completely shifted. It's turned upside down. You alluded to some of the change that has gone on internally at Fox News Network. You're talking about data points. So different states, making sure that you're not just pushing out an experience that is one for all and everyone gets the same experience, but how are you taking back that data or the individualized data or data points and piping that back into your roadmap? Yeah,
I think if anything, what this taught us is, it was always a theme, I think, of where we were headed in the digital news space, which is, it essentially is taking the content and the content, the product always starts with the editorial, at least in the news landscape. And it's how does the tech side, and especially the product side, tell that story better? Because we're not going to change the content, but we're going to engage the user and make it a better experience.
Yeah.
And so what we started seeing, and I think we've seen this for a while, is users want a more informative experience, and they're super smart. And I think this is always something that we take for granted is, we have so much as users being thrown at us. I know me specifically, I'm a news junkie, so I'm ingesting news left and right everywhere. But you want more information. You want as much information, as much engagement, and then you want to deliver that to a user and let them kind of digest it. And so I think one thing we're seeing is we've always been hesitant. How much information do you give out? How deep of an infographic do you give? And I think what we're learning, and we just put out an awesome graphic about the COVID vaccine landscape. And I think one thing about that is we were always nervous, like we're giving out, like there's probably 300 different vaccines and you could dig through, and we're like, is that too much? Is that, no, and I think users love that. Users want all that information, and then they can kind of comb through it and kind of deduce from it. So I think one thing the data points that we're seeing is not only do we have to, I think, tell the story, which is the content, but we have to tell it in an informative and educational and experiential way where users are engaging with it and they actually feel a part of that content.
Cool. I have a question. This isn't on script. This is completely off, but it just came to my mind. Is there ever a scenario where your customers, your viewers, your followers are loving the data? Do you ever find that there's a fine line between sharing too much data or scaling back anything based off of behavior, based off insights?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the story you're telling. I always think the more information you can give, the better. As long as it helps and doesn't deter it. I think there is a point of, you give so much information that the message gets lost. And so I think there is a point, but I always err on the side of, I think the more information you can give a user, the better. Whether it be infographics, listicles, the more stuff we can give. I remember a conversation having with our design team is, we were always tripping up about how long an article can be, or how long a piece of content can be. If it's too long, do users get lost? And I think what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing, is users they're not afraid to scroll down. And on mobile, it's even more of like, we see things on mobile and all of a sudden something on desktop just grew by like 5 times. And we're like, oh, is this too much? And I think we always kind of clashed on that, but I think what I'm seeing, and as a user of news myself, I have no problem reading a long form or scrolling through. And I think you're actually seeing a movement or a shift to kind of more information and more kind of content rather than here's a quote or here's a short blurb and you're on your way.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, that's extremely helpful. Thanks for the insight. So kind of moving along here, over the years, I mean, Taplytics has been in business. We've seen a shift in conversation with our customers and product leaders from themes to looking at like product strategy, which I know, Matt, you and I have talked about in the past, to broader themes of things like customer experiences and customer journeys. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone who's watching. I'm sure the conversations are going on with multiple of the individuals that are here today. But the question I'd like to pose to you is, what does that digital journey mean to you? And then what's the process of designing, redesigning, or improving the journeys that you are using today or trying to create?
Yeah, I think user journey, I think even, and I've been guilty of this, is you get caught up, I think, on a project where you're so focused on this one page or this one aspect, and you're not thinking about the larger journey and the larger story you're trying to tell, or the larger brand you're working on. And so I think where we're seeing a huge shift across everybody is that it's no longer, how do I get you from Google onto an article and that's it. Yeah. It's about, what's that experience on Google? How do we look on Google? And now when you're coming from Google, how do we give you an experience that matches where you came from? Because if you're coming from search, or you're coming from our homepage, or you're coming from any normal sources, it tells you something about the user, and you should essentially tailor that experience to how that user is going to. And so I think that's going to be, I think it's a work in progress for us. And I think it's something we have to continuously improve on, is not just thinking about siloed, and we're doing this especially with our elections experience coming up, is, it's not just a siloed election experience. If you're coming from any area of our site, we should be able to give you this information, and you should go on this journey through the election tonight, which is an insanely complicated, and data's everywhere, and you're getting race calls and all this, and alerts are going off. It's how do we give you this journey as you come into our site, and string you along through the site, so you have an amazing experience from start to finish, rather than, hey, you hit a page and then you bailed.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. I mean, we look at the Netflixes of the world, right? They're always trying to figure out, how do we keep you engaged? How do we keep you watching the next show? How do we make better suggestions? So you brought up an interesting point there about guiding the user through a given path based off of, let's say, data metrics, points of interest that you're noticing with the behavior within the apps, all things that benefit the actual user at the end of the day, right? So how do you guys design metrics across the customer journey and kind of assign value to those? Like, what are the key points? What are the things that you guys are like, aha, we need to change this experience based off of X or Y?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, the two experiences that I try to focus on is it's new users, and then the users we have, the loyal users. how do we give them an amazing experience so that their journey lasts? So when I'm thinking about new users, I'm looking at search, I'm looking at social, how many referrals we're getting, how many unique users are hitting our pages, and kind of where they're coming from, and how do we increase our visibility? Are there platforms that we're not on that we need to be on, or is there growth in platforms like things like Apple News, and they keep new ones pop up, I feel like every day, like new third-party distribution platforms that are a new avenue to kind of grow our users. On the flip side, the users that we already have, it's all about engagement, how much time on site, how many page views per session. So it's really like, they're coming onto our site. How do we give them the best experience possible so that they stay on our site, they look up new content, they look up different content verticals. If you're coming in and you're coming in for a politics story, you can check out our sports section, you can check out our entertainment section, and you can kind of find new areas of content that you didn't know necessarily that we had or that would be of interest to you.
Awesome. So creating stickiness obviously is of super importance within the mobile or web experience, obviously. Cool. Awesome. So moving on to mobile first. Heavy topic, I guess, aren't they all? But so I guess kind of the opinion I'm coming from and the conversations we and other companies have had in the past is the importance of being mobile first and where your users are seemingly. It's a no-brainer to go mobile first. I mean, Taplytics was born with mobile first in mind. Yet a comic retort we hear from various product teams is management's continued prioritization of web at the expense of mobile. And I'm sure we've had conversations, or others have had that in the past. But can you talk a little bit about your path towards designing a user's digital journey centered around the mobile first experience?
Totally, and I think one thing that gets lost is whoever says mobile first is easy. It's not. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
I'd be lying to you if I said we're amazing, or there's another company that's doing it. Like, it is hard doing mobile first, and the reason it's hard is, I'm talking to you right now on my laptop. Things are getting built on desktops and laptops. We are seeing everything on a bigger screen, a bigger experience. And so it's your nature to be like, oh, look how much we could fit on this screen. And so it is hard. And I think the two things that I think have helped us so much is, one, to your point, we're on that flip side where we have our executive team from the top down saying we need to be a mobile first company. And I think that was a huge piece, because I think if your executive team is not bought into this mobile first idea, it's so hard to succeed because you're fighting an uphill battle against them. Luckily for us, everybody from the top has been saying, we need to go mobile first. I get emails about mobile app much more than I get about our desktop, or mobile web much more than our desktop experience from the executive team. And so I think it's so important that it has to start at the top. The second piece is you need buy-in across all your teams. And the one specific team I'll call out here is our design team is awesome at putting together a mobile first experience. The first design we see is mobile when we go through a new page or a new project. And you have to have that mindset that, because if you look at desktop first, you see how, I could fit so much stuff and we could do this and this and this. And then you get it down and you're just like, that's it.
That's a long road. Yeah.
And so it's tough. And so I think I credit our design team, and I also credit the development team, the QA. I mean, all our team has bought into this idea of being mobile first. And it makes our job as a product so much easier because, everyone's on the apps, everyone's checking out what we're doing there. And so it's helped us on this kind of slow transition to kind of this mobile experience. I mean, there's always going to be a need for a bigger experience or like a bigger screen experience. I do think you're going to start seeing a divergence of, what I do on my mobile app is going to be very different what I do. And I think you're seeing that with iPads. Like my tablet I'm using for much different purposes. And so I think in the future, you'll have personalized experience based on the platform you're getting for specific purposes. And so I'm intrigued where that leads us and how personalized you can get on those devices and knowing what users are coming there for.
Cool. Interesting. So yeah, mobile first, and I've been following kind of Fox in the news and LinkedIn and whatever it may be. I'm kind of keeping up to date, and I'm seeing things like what you just mentioned on the West Coast. For anyone that doesn't know, Fox has another division that's located in LA, and you've got things like Tubi that are popping up, right? And is that because of the demand of mobile first, or is that kind of in coordinates with planning mobile and having desktop, iPad follow that kind of path?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big story there is, I think once Fox Corp came about, there was kind of this resurgence and like desire to, we're now this kind of lean tech company, and we see it now, and all these kind of silos that were previously there are all broken down, and now we're all really coming together, and you're seeing these shared services teams that are, we're not just the news or business, we're kind of as a whole, this Fox corporate mentality. And so I think now what we're seeing is, how do we start, plugging in these different parts to kind of give an amazing Fox Corp experience. And I think things like Tubi is an awesome product, and you're seeing it's beneficial to the experience. And there's other platforms that we've seen integrated, like Fox Credible has been an awesome integration point, because it's an awesome company that's doing amazing stuff in kind of the loan and credit card knowledge area, and how we integrate that with Fox Business, which is people are coming there because they want to know what's going on with my 401k, how do I get a new mortgage, and so you're seeing these plug in. On the mobile side, I think you have to be essentially seeing how these things fit into that mobile space. And I think that's kind of the first look at it. And then how do you expand it out to kind of these other platforms, whether it be desktop or OTT or other areas.
Cool. Awesome. You mentioned scale and speed a couple minutes ago. So that's something I would love to touch on with you. So kind of the colon there is removing friction from each touch point. So from what I understand and what you've said in previous conversations, Fox is going in the right direction. It sounds like the buy-in doesn't necessarily need to be brought up the chain. It's the bottom and the top are meeting in the middle to find out what's the best path forward, which, I mean, if I could give any advice, if anyone would take my advice, you guys are doing it the right way, at least so far. So that's fantastic to see.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So design for speed and scale. So for the people at home, may or may not know this, but Fox has, if not one of the most high traffic news broadcasters in North America. So you guys are looking at an audience over 100 million users. That could be in a day, that could be in a month. It depends, like the election going on why that traffic would be coming in. With such a heightened level of significance, given that that type of reach, would you mind talking to us in the audience a little bit about what goes into planning a release for such a big scale? And how do you guys decide on how to build and how to go about validating those assumptions?
Yeah, I mean, speed. For speed and scale, I mean, I think it's always kind of, people look at it two ways. I mean, we're a super lean team, and that has its negatives and that has its benefits. The negatives are, we have to pick and choose what battles we want to fight. The good part is we can pivot so quickly. And so the speed, how we get things out and get things done, is tremendous. And it's because we have this close-knit team that's really working hand in hand together. And I always say, I mean, if you want a successful organization, I mean, there's 5 groups on our team: QA, design, product, QA, design, product, and development. And if you have those 5 teams, if you have every leg in the spoke working, you're going to be successful. And that's the amazing part about working at Fox. I think that's what gets us this speed. The key part about the scaling piece is, we don't have the luxury to throw something out there and it breaks. So I attribute the QA team. They do tremendous work because everything is so well tested with the lean team that we have, that it can go out to these, millions of users on a dime, and, we're not worried, is this going to break everything, or, and so I'd say in the last year or so, we've done tremendous work with, scaling releases out. A/B testing is a huge piece of this, and, how can we test something out to make sure it works before we roll out? Because I think you alluded to, I mean, the presence is so known that, like, as soon as something's wrong on the site, you'll hear it, and it's on Twitter and it's on everything. Yeah. And so what's good is we've been doing a tremendous job about, making smart decisions, really testing things, but not letting it impede how fast we work.
Cool. That's awesome. And it's kind of a side context. My wife and I watch the news in the morning or after work, and yeah, you catch that spelling error, or you catch the wrong image or the wrong voiceover, and it's like you look it up. Hey, what was that I just read? And it's everywhere. Everyone can see it. So that's really cool. So I guess if I were to ask another kind of follow-up question there, it's like, how have you and your team adopted a fail fast and learn mindset? So you alluded to that, right? You guys have a great QA process. You have a fantastic team broken up into roughly 5 groups. But fail-safe is something that anyone out here that's listening is going to say they wish they had, or they're building something to find a fail-safe, such as feature flagging or looking at release cycles or rollbacks. How do you guys do that? How do you kind of create that mindset internally, and how has this evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we've leaned into is, I think scaling out our releases, especially on mobile and mobile app, is, we're keeping a really close eye on the early days of, if the app's getting rolled out to 1%, 2%, 3% of audience, we have such a close eye on the fail rates and the error rates that are going out, and the ops team and the development team do such a tremendous job at keeping track of that, so that we never get that full scale issue where all of a sudden everything's down. And so I think that's one of the key pieces. Feature flagging is another huge piece. I think being able to, I think with apps, it's specifically difficult because if you roll out a feature and, it's in the app release, you're stuck with that for a good chunk of time. And so I think doing feature flagging, doing scaled releases out, those are really kind of the key things that we use. It's also just tremendous QA, is knowing what to test and how it interacts with others. And that's what's great about being on our team, is we work so closely with our QA team. So we're showing them this is how users are going to use these tools, and they're able to kind of create these amazing test plans that we don't have to worry too much about. It's going to get out there and be used a different way, and it's going to break the whole site.
Cool. You mentioned the buy-in. So we were talking about Fox is doing such a great job, specifically Fox Corp over to Fox News Network. They're doing a great job of having the buy-in and meeting in the middle. So you've got top and bottom agreeing on what the next steps are. Scaling back a little bit, or going back in time, was there any difficulty in getting buy-in we know the mobile first is coming from the top, but getting them to that mindset, was there any convincing internally with you and your team in QA to kind of say, hey guys, we have an opportunity here and we need the buy-in? Or was this just something that organically came with kind of insight and foresight into the industry that we need to develop mobile first?
Not so much mobile first. Mobile first was bought in at a very early stage at Fox, which is awesome. Yeah. I'd say, and it's not Fox specific, but A/B testing was one of those things where it's tough getting buy-in, and I'd even argue for me it was tough because it's a change in your mental state. Because I think everyone's under this, like everyone thinks being right it means you have worth, and you're kind of going to excel at something, and you get their promotion for being right so many times. And the whole idea of A/B testing is to throw that out the window, because you don't have to be right. You could test 5 things and figure out what your users prefer, and where to go. And so I think that was probably the most interesting mental change even for me is, I remember we redesigned the homepage. This was kind of early in my days at Fox. And if you ever redesign a homepage, it is a horrible experience, because you'll just be eating pints of ice cream when you're reading the feedback that people give you. But even that, we let the dust settle, and I was reading the feedback, and everybody kept asking for this one component back. And so we did an A/B test. We added back the component in kind of a new way, and it performed horribly. And it was interesting to me, because if you would have said, I'll bet you $100 that this will work, I would have said, easiest money. Yeah. But you have to, and it was such a learning experience. And that's why although I don't really love like the buzzwords, fail fast, it wasn't a failure. I just learned something really good about my audience. And I learned, change is difficult. We redesigned the homepage, and now once the dust is settled and the change done, I learned that, what they actually preferred before, they don't necessarily prefer now. And so it's that mindset of, I don't have to be right all the time. I could let the users really tell me what is right and what they prefer. Because we all have our own concept of what right is. And I think once we get that out of our heads, I think the company performs. And I saw it, at least in-house, as we did more tests and we saw that we were kind of learning new things and kind of moving in a great direction, and we were seeing, positive results on a lot of our tests. That's when the buy-in really kicks off, because you realize, just being right only gets you so far, but really learning what your audience likes and doesn't like, that's where the real power is going to be.
Awesome. And I think I'm going to put words in your mouth here, but my next question I wanted to ask was sharing best practices to the audience out there. Would one of those best practices is failure is a step to getting things done right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it a failure. I mean, it's, I'll run a test on something or I'll push out something, and if it doesn't do well, it's not that I failed, it's I learned what the audience doesn't like, or I learned, and I think the key failure, or the key issue that a lot of teams run into, and I do it myself, is that you run a test and one succeeds, one fails. Maybe you'll look into why that succeeded, and then that's a great first step. But then the second step should be why did part 2 fail? Yeah. Because you're going to learn a lot more from that, and it'll help you on future decisions understand, why did my audience not like that? And that'll be such a better story than, oh, I got this right, on to the next test. It's learning what they don't like and what they like, and using those as you progress.
Cool. And obviously the data behind that, right, to make sure that you're validating those decisions. Okay, cool. I think we've got maybe 10 minutes left here, so I'll try and go through this at a decent speed with you. Actually, Matt, I'll leave this up to you. Do you want to talk about speed right now with breaking news, which is one of the topics that we're going to discuss, or do you want to jump over to election coverage?
We have 10 minutes. I think we could do a quick 5. Let's try to break. We can do 5 and 5.
Okay, so let's do 5 and 5. How about, so on the topic of speed and scale, obviously breaking news is an absolute beast all on its own, from both a journalistic and technical standpoint. So my question to you would be, what are some challenges you're faced with needing to reach your user base right when the news breaks?
Yeah, and this is, I think we've even talked about this, is breaking news is one of the more difficult areas, because you have to be super fast and you have to be super right. And you can't give up either one. And I think one of the challenges I'm seeing is, it used to be we could throw a banner on the site and send an app alert and you reached your audience.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. Now your audience is on email, your audience is on Apple News, your audience is on all these other platforms. And so you have to not only be on your platforms, you have to be on everybody's platform. And I think that's where you're starting to see the challenges, because I could send out an email, or I could send out an alert super fast, but is my email going to go out, or how delayed is it going to be? How does it get to everyone's inbox simultaneously? You have to start measuring these and trying to time those all out to be kind of coming out at the same time. That's really where I'm seeing the difficulty in breaking news, and I think that's going to be the piece where I'm interested to see where the industry moves on. How do I be on all my platforms, alert them all at once? That's really, I think, going to be the key one moving forward.
No pressure, though, at all, right? No pressure.
No, this is all real hair, I'm telling you.
Well, if I took my hat off, you'd see how much hair I've got left. So one of the questions that came in for the audience is, what are some of the tools you're using to collect and analyze the customer feedback before and after a product or feature launch? It's a great
question. So I think you have to go to qualitative and quantitative. So on the qualitative side, we have a customer service portal that, and our users love to reach out and tell us what they think. So I think that's a key piece, is really looking at your app reviews, looking at these, and there's a lot of fluff in app reviews and our customer support portal. But there's so many nuggets of knowledge in there, and you really have to, it's worth digging through the fluff to get that, really good information point. Because there's been so many times where I'm reading an app review, I'm reading like 10, and one of them has such a great thought or a great thing that we missed out on as a product team. And so I think it's hearing your audience. And then the second thing, it's on the quantitative side, is looking at the analytics, and not just seeing, did page views go up? Did uniques go up? It's understanding why they went up. Did they go up for this reason? What made those changes? And I think asking the why on the quantitative is such a key part.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Cool. So why don't we, I think we've got a couple minutes left. Why don't we hop over to the election coverage? It's going to start off with a question talking about the scale, the size, the speed of the election. Obviously this year, one is going to be an interesting one. I think everyone knows that. It's going to be entertaining, to say the least. But it's no surprise that this time of year is your equivalent of Cyber Monday. It's just times 1,000. The scale is massive.
We call it the Super Bowl if the Super Bowl happened every 4 years.
The Super Bowl if the Super Bowl happened every 4 years. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. On top of that, so the traffic surge you're seeing isn't just in one day. It's obviously going to be over the course of, leading up to, 2 weeks from now, and then trailing off after that. So my question would be, can you kind of let us under the hood and help us understand what that must be like? One, kind of on a personal level for your job role, and then two, the preparation and frenzy that kind of tags along with that, with the audience and the world.
Dan, you don't have to be coy. We are stressed. You've met with us in the past few months. We are stressed. Honestly, it is the most nerve-wracking, exciting. It's so many emotions because it is such a big event and it's so important to everyone. And there's so much. There's so many fun things you could do, and so we have a blast doing it. It just causes a lot of gray hair, but once you get past that, I think the most interesting part of the elections is, as with anything, it takes a long time to build these experiences. Yeah. And so the interesting part about elections is, we've started scoping out and designing our elections experience probably a year ago. But what's always interesting is the real story about the elections comes out about a week or 2 weeks or a month before. And so you're building these whole experiences, and then you're going to find out the real story about like what the election is. Yeah. And so for example, 2020, we built everything, and then, a month out, pandemic, COVID hits, and you're like, wow, how is this going to affect? Yeah. And then now you're hearing it on all of the news channels that, how big mail-in voting is going to be, and, is it just an election night, or is it an election week, or is it an election month? And so what's interesting is you build these experiences, and then knowing that, a month before, we're going to have to pivot. And so I think I credit the product manager who's leading the elections team. He's done a tremendous job on being able to, set up the groundwork and then allow us to really pivot last minute and be able to tell the proper story about these elections. And so I think that's the exciting part that we're really in right now.
Yeah, exciting and stressful.
Yeah, it's a nice mixture.
Yeah, cool. So you kind of alluded to this where, one, there can be a very quick change, and that could be with a news segment and shifts everything in a different direction, or talk track, experience, etc. How will you guys engage with the users different this year to compared to previous years?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Difference.
Yeah, 2016, I think there was you wanted to be kind of the coolest kid on the block. You wanted flashy things, and you kind of wanted this. And I think now what I'm seeing a movement, and I really credit, I think New York Times has done a great job, and Washington Post is really doing good in the space, and 538 is also doing it, is how do I use data to really tell the story? And so I think that's really the 2020 kind of theme is, we have all these kind of maps and data points and everything like that, but how do I take it all and really tell an immersive story that a user just doesn't have to, see a race get called. They can actually see, see data in a new way. And so if you guys want to check out now, I'll do a shameless plug. FoxNews.com/ I think it's Margin of Victory or Margin, And we created this immersive experience that actually, it goes back to the 1970s, cool. And it shows what the margin of victory of each state was. And so you could see in 2016 how close that race really was. Wow. And you could see, how did, Michigan, how many votes really was it that moved it? And you can go back to 1980s and 70s and 60s and see how close these races are, or how the blowout was. And so I think it's stuff like that it takes data that's already available to you and puts it in an amazing storytelling device, and then presents this to users that can engage with it. And so I think that's the 2020 theme that I think we're running with.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And I think, why don't we give your traffic a little bit of a spike right now, and you feel free to post in that link into the channel so people can take a look. I know I'm going to. I know the Taplytics team will take a look for sure.
But yeah, if there's any bugs, feel free to send an email our way.
Okay, cool. Honestly, Matt, I think we're short on time, but I truly appreciate, one, getting to know you over the last little bit, two, seeing how you guys are growing. I know you guys have a small but extremely mighty team. It's something I respect looking at from afar and kind of working closely with and understanding a little bit more. But kudos to your team. It's amazing. I think you guys are leading by example. For the other teams that are listening out there, if you guys need to chat with Matt, I would message him if I were you, just to pick his brain, see who he's working with, what tools he's using to get to where he is today, and what he's iterating based off of. But yeah, I'm impressed, man. It's been great to talk to you.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for everyone on the on-air side for putting this on. I think, the more things like this, I think the conferences, they're great because you can hear other industries, you can hear other people in your industry and kind of what they're working through, what issues they're running into, and it helps, I think, everybody as a whole kind of move the storytelling and move the products forward. And that's, as users, that's all we want.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for your time, man. I know you guys are a little bit busy over there, but
back to elections.
Yeah, I'm sure you're getting nailed on Slack right now at work. Just what's going on? Where are you? But yeah, thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Cool. Thank you very much.